Hi there, Deanne from Four Sons Homestead here, and I'm in the forest today. I gotta be outside because my kids are outside running around, so I just gotta keep an eye on them. But it's a beautiful May day, and I am just about to flip over my kombucha, and I've had some people ask me how I made my own SCOBY. So I'm gonna show you how I made my own SCOBY. So you might ask what a SCOBY is, and a SCOBY is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So it's a living, breathing, gelatinous mushroom, some call it. I'll show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like. So every time I make a new kombucha, a new SCOBY forms. And once we make a SCOBY, we call this our mother. And I can peel this apart and give some away. I can do all sorts of things with it. I can jerky it. I can candy it. I can put it in my compost. I can feed it to my dog. It's full of great cultures and benefits. So I've been drinking kombucha for over 10 years now, and back when I started drinking and making my own kombucha, you couldn't walk into a grocery store or anything to get kombucha, let alone I don't think there was anywhere where there was places where you could buy SCOBYs, but I didn't even know they existed. When I was first drinking kombucha, it was you got a part of a SCOBY from a friend of a friend of a friend. Nowadays, you see kombucha and SCOBY everywhere. It's so much more accessible. But if you're like me, if you live in an area where you don't have access to certain things and only things to ship to you, it's nice to get a little creative and know that if you wanted to grow your kombucha, if you wanted to try different styles, you can make your own. So this SCOBY, which was originally made back in January, I happened to get my hands on some kombucha from Wolseley Kombucha, which is in the big city, which is over about 3 hours away from me. And I just happened to be in a small town that had a health food store, and they were carrying Wolseley Kombucha kombucha. So I bought a plain, natural, just a plain Jane kind of kombucha, and I inoculated some tea with it, and eventually I grew a SCOBY. And since then, I've been making my own kombucha on a weekly basis, and my SCOBY is growing stronger every single time. If you know somebody who has a SCOBY, you can get a SCOBY off of them and start inoculating your own kombucha. But if you don't have access to a SCOBY, you need to find some kombucha. So if you've got a friend who's got kombucha, take about half a cup from them. If you don't have a friend, check out a health food store or a grocery store. And just have a look around for a plain Jane, natural, unflavored kombucha. You want something that has no added sugars, no carbonation, and no added flavors like a ginger or a lemon, sometimes in your grocery store there is a health food section. You might be lucky to find some there. So once you find your plain Jane kombucha, I'm going to be using this kombucha to start another SCOBY to show you, I will use it like you would a jar. So basically, once you've got your store-bought kombucha, all you need is half a cup to brew your own. So I'm going to get, the most important thing is to make sure all of your vessels are clean. Cleanliness is one of the most important things when you're dealing with cultures and yeast, or I should say cultures, bacteria, yeast, that sort of thing. You want only good bacteria in here. And so if you have bad bacteria on your hands or in your jars, you're only feeding them. So you want to make sure everything is clean. And I will leave all the information in the description below. We need a jar. You're going to need, I think they're half-gallon jars. You're going to need some black tea. I bought an organic black tea in bulk, and you can do anywhere between 3 to 5 tea bags depending on your strength. Personally, the stronger it is, I find it ferments a little bit faster, but then you do have a bit of a stronger tasting kombucha. If you don't have access to bagged, you can use a loose leaf. So if you've got a tea shop in your town, I believe it's 1 tablespoon loose tea, which is equal to 1 bag. Okay, so to this, we're gonna add hot water. And while this is steeping, we're gonna add sugar. And you can use cane sugar, you can use white sugar. I don't recommend using a honey or a maple syrup or a brown sugar. You want to just stick with a white sugar. If you have access to a cane sugar, that's great. That is best, but I don't have access to a cane sugar right now. So I'm using white sugar. And you're going to want 1/2 cup of white sugar. Oh, and I brought a funnel so I don't spill all over the place. One reason why I don't like using a loose leaf tea is because then you have to strain it out. It means you have to transfer jars. And every time you are transferring stuff, you are at risk of contaminating your brew. But whatever works for you. Sometimes I've had my tea bags burst and I've had to strain them out. But I mean, once you know your level of cleanliness, then you can start gauging that stuff. So I'm just going to let this sit and, hi bird, brew for about 10 minutes or steep for about 10 minutes. Once this is steep, then we're going to add 1/2 cup of kombucha. And this kombucha acts like our inoculant. So if you've ever made a sourdough starter, if you've ever made yogurt, even cheese, everything needs a little starter. And that's like a bit of your culture. And that culture will inoculate this, and eventually it will breed forth a new SCOBY. I'm going to take out my 1/2 cup of kombucha out of here, and I'm also going to make a batch of kombucha. So once your SCOBY is active and growing, you can pull off and make a batch of kombucha. And it's super easy to do it. We are pretty much going to follow the same process as this. Again, anywhere between 3 to 5 tea bags, whichever your preference is. 1/2 cup of sugar, followed by 1/2 cup of culture, and fill it up and your SCOBY, and you're good to go. So again, hot water. I'm only going to fill up halfway because this is hot water. So a lot of people view kombucha as having a lot of sugar, but kombucha needs sugar. Your cultures, the bacteria, the yeast, they need sugar. It's their food source. So don't look at sugar in this as a bad thing because the SCOBY eats it up. That's how it grows. So by the time you are actually drinking your kombucha, there isn't a lot of residual sugar left. So while this is waiting for its SCOBY, I am actually going to pour off kombucha into my jar for my ferment. I need 1/2 cup to go in here to start growing my SCOBY, and I need 1/2 cup in here to start another batch of kombucha. So I've got another jar here to which I am going to add a lemon. So I can drink the kombucha straight off of this one. Once you start brewing kombucha, you can start taking a straw and start sampling your kombucha to see how you like it, how tart you like it, how vinegary you like it. I usually let my kombucha in these jars go brew for about a week to 2 weeks, depending on the temperature. The hotter your space is, the quicker it's going to ferment. So you can drink this straight. You can drink this straight off if you want, or you can do what's called a second ferment. And when you do a second ferment, you can add fruit, you can add juices, you can even add another tea bag to it and let it steep with that in it, like some hibiscus flowers, rose petals, that sort of thing. So once I'm on a second ferment, I just squeeze my juice into the jar. I don't put the peels in here because this isn't fruit that I've grown, so I have no idea what's been possibly sprayed on the peels. This juice will actually help it ferment really quick and will help it to carbonate. If you want it to carbonate a little bit more, you can add like a teaspoon up to a tablespoon of sugar. Can you give me a second, please? Sometimes if the kids have leftover juice from like a juice box, I will add that. And that will give your kombucha some flavor, and it'll help it to carbonate real quick. This is ready to go. All I have to do is add my kombucha.
What's that big say?
And you'll see a lot of people, I'll show you this carbonation already. I haven't added anything to carbonate it. This is just naturally carbonating on its own due to fermentation. Sweetheart, 1 second. 1 second. So in the case of a second ferment, you want to cap it tightly and you want to check and burp it. So right now, excuse me, sweetheart. Right now you can hear the pinging of the cap. You want to check it every day because as this builds up carbonation, this is going to get tight and it can get explosive. So it's best to just unscrew your lid and it'll psst, and then you can screw it back on. And I will let this sit 2 to 3 days before I put it in the fridge to become drinkable.
Open this.
Yes, sir.
Don't drop it in the kombucha.
I won't drop it in the kombucha. There you go. So this is the one that we are going to grow our SCOBY in. So we will do that right now. I will take my tea bags out. We've already added our sugar, so we don't need to worry about that. And I'm not going to measure, but I'm just going to put in about half a cup of kombucha into here. I'll put it right up here so you can see. And if you put a little bit more, like if you have a whole bottle, you can put a little bit more. That's fine. It's not going to hurt it. This is just going to help kickstart your culture. And then you're just going to want to...
Can you open this?
Yeah, could you give me 1 second, please? Just going to give it a bit more. It's just going to help kickstart it that much more. And then you're going to want to top it off with water. And I don't like to go any further. Just like to leave it there. Then you're going to want to cover it with a piece of paper towel, a cloth, a coffee filter. You don't want to do cheesecloth because cheesecloth might let in other things. You just want something so that it can breathe. We want this to breathe right now. That is what we want to do when it comes to our kombucha. We want it to breathe. We want it to gather all the natural bacteria and yeast and wild yeast out of the air and start fermenting. And this we will sit someplace warm for 2 to 4 weeks. So on top of your fridge, if you have a growing mat for like peppers and tomatoes, you can put a growing mat underneath it. If you have under cupboard lights, you can put it under your lights, and then when it's on during the day, it'll help it warm up. You want your kombucha to just be in a warm place, not in direct sunlight. Just on a kitchen counter is fine. The warmer it is, the sooner it will start to culture over. The cooler it is, the longer it will take. So it can take anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks. So just check it every so often. In about 2 to 6 weeks, you will notice this thin little membrane-ish type layer developing on your kombucha. This thin layer should look jelly-like in consistency. It should not look black. It should not be fuzzy. It may be whitish. It may have a little bit of brown, even a little bit of like kind of like a sludge. Which would be like the sediment that you'll often see in natural kombuchas. You can see a little bit of the sediment. It may have that. Once you start to notice that thin little jelly-like layer, I will pull off and I will make my first batch of kombucha. Once that 2 to 6 weeks is up and you've noticed that thin jelly-like layer, I will then make my first batch of kombucha.
Okay,
Bye. The first few batches of kombucha will probably seem a little on the weak side. They may not have a lot of carbonation, but it's May now, and my kombucha is very strong and very active and very carbonated just from naturally fermenting on its own. So it doesn't take long for your SCOBY to develop. Your kombucha should taste tart, somewhat vinegary, acidic. It should not taste sour. When it comes to any form of fermentation, really, you have to learn to trust your eyes, your nose, and your mouth. Some of the health benefits with drinking kombucha are just a whole around gut health, better digestion. If you're somebody who constantly deals with a bloated stomach, gas, kombucha is something that will help things move. It'll help develop a good gut flora. If you're on antibiotics for whatever reason, adding kombucha will really bring up your good bacteria count and will also help fight whatever you're fighting, but it'll also help replenish the good bacteria that those antibiotics are killing. Kombucha is a great thing if you are trying to get off of sodas or even off of alcoholic drinks. Kombucha can help eliminate acid reflux. It's great for your hair, your skin. It's been known to help you sleep. Basically, kombucha will just help your body and help your gut. And when your gut is being helped, your immune system can then repair and restore and replenish itself. And then a lot of other things will start falling into place. So I'll show you how I make my second batch of kombucha. So once this is done steeping, just like it is when we made our kombucha starter, we put our tea bags in here and we let this steep. Because it's still a little bit on the warm side, I'm going to actually add my water first. You want this to be room temperature. If it's a little warm, that's okay. You just don't want something too warm where it's going to kill off your bacteria. This is more than half a cup, but it's too little for me to pour off into a second ferment, so I'm just going to dump the whole thing in there. And this is now ready for its next brew of kombucha. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a piece of paper towel over, and I'm going to put this someplace warm. Once you have a well-established SCOBY in like a half gallon like I do, you will be making kombucha every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on how warm your environment is. Probably the next time that I make kombucha, I will split my kombucha and I will actually start a SCOBY hotel. So like I said, this will sit for about 1 to 2 weeks, and then I'll pull off and do another batch of kombucha. This second ferment will sit on our counter for 1 to 3 days, depending. And from there, we can drink it. We could drink this now if we wanted to, but I like to add a little bit of flavor and I like to build up the carbonation. When you do second ferments, it gets really exciting because you can start adding all sorts of fruits and berries. You can add herbs. The last batch I made, I did a jalapeno, cowboy candy. So I had candied some jalapenos in the fall time from our garden. I added some of those jalapenos and some of that sweet sauce that I candied them in, and it made this super spicy, really honeyed kombucha that was really good because I was kind of congested with spring, winter. So the flavor possibilities are endless with kombucha. And some flavor combinations will really amp up the carbonation, and some flavor combinations will just keep it mellow. Now back to our original kombucha, our starter kombucha where we're going to grow a SCOBY. Again, we're going to want to sit this someplace warm for 2 to 4 weeks, upwards of 6, and we're just going to wait for that baby SCOBY to grow. And once it grows, you are off to the races with kombucha making. So I hope that this video showed you how you can make your own baby SCOBY at home. I hope it was, I gave you enough information about the health benefits and everything when it comes to kombucha, and you got a glimpse of how to make kombucha once you get a SCOBY started. Okay, so remember this jar of kombucha, or this baby SCOBY that we're trying to make? We started this a week ago, and look at that. This is a nice, little, very active. You can see how thin it is. But very active SCOBY. And I said it would take anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks, and this isn't even a week old. So I'm going to leave this SCOBY in here for another week probably before I pull this batch of kombucha off and then actually start making kombucha from it. So I hope this video was helpful and showed you how to make your own baby SCOBY. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Other than that, I wish you the best of luck. Smells nice and vinegary, very tart. And this I made from my own kombucha, and I bred my own baby from it. And this is going to have a very long, happy life, giving us many, many jars of wonderful, fermented, probiotic-rich kombucha.